We've now been joined by Charlie Wolf, US political commentator and co-host of the podcast Pod to Be American. He's also formerly from the organization Republicans Abroad. Charlie Wolf, good to talk to you again. What are the success stories so far of America First?
Well, I think the fact that he's changing the priorities. I mean, we're again leading from the front as opposed to leading from behind as vis-a-vis the Obama administration. This is someone that has no problems in projecting power as the use of preventing the use of power, or the need to hopefully go to war. He's standing up, I think, to North Korea. Sure, it looks a bit scary at the present time. If you're someone watching from afar, it looks a bit different than what I think people are used to, just catching the last bit of the last person's answer. But I think, again, it's a dramatic change and a welcome change from what we've had from the last 8 years.
How can you possibly say, just to interrupt you, Charlie Wolf, how can you possibly say he's changing policies? His team, his implementation team are actually super conventional. You've got Mr. Mattis, you've got McMaster, you've also got Mnuchin. That's kind of out with the old, in with the old.
Well, maybe I better phrase it in it's the presentation is going back. Again, with Mr. Obama, we had, again, from this sort of a lead from behind, the apology tours. This is someone who is very proud of what the country represents, understands what the country represents, its values, etc., and is happy to state them plainly and without any reservations. He may not sound as slick as Mr. Obama, but I think even just watching on this last tour, where it's a bit unusual to see the president acting as a salesman. Was it in South Korea, talking about how many missiles he's going to buy, and they're great missiles, and and again, I know that's a totally foreign thing from those in the foreign policy sphere, but again, it's a bit different and a bit welcome.
So it's okay in your mind if you have a US president who apparently, because if one reads the tweets, this is what he does all the time, he gloats over other world leaders' problems. He did it with Theresa May 36 hours ago, the UK Prime Minister, once he'd actually tagged the right Theresa May. He looked like he was gloating over a problem that statistically, numerically, analytically simply does not exist in the UK, and then he retweets a fake video that was unreal. But that's okay because that gets his message out there. And then we have, just let me finish the point, Charlie Wolf, please. He then gets backed up by his press secretary who says, well, whether it was fake or not doesn't really matter because we've got the debate going.
Well, again, he is getting the debate going, and that is important. He's going over the heads of the journalists who've been giving the guy, I don't even want to say rough ride. He's been giving him I think a very unfair ride in how they're reporting stories. Now, as far as these tweets are concerned, these films, as far as I was concerned, tell a narrative, and I think it is a very correct narrative. As someone who lives in London, there has been some problems with terrorism here, obviously. I think as far as Mrs. May is concerned, she would have been far better, I think, to have very quietly picked up the phone and said, excuse me, Donald, did you know that this group is not what you may think it is? It's a racist group, and that it would have been fixed. But to embarrass the president that way, he's going to respond. I think it's a natural thing that he does.
Okay, very briefly, I just want to interrupt you again, just to pick up on one point there. How can you say again that he's being given a rough ride? The man is on Twitter and in public forums an habitual liar. And if it's about, let me finish, if it's about separating out the message from the delivery and the implementation of that message, he shouldn't lie.
No, he's not lying. I think what's happening here is you having a press that is taking things literally instead of seriously. He does have a way of speaking in hyperbole. And again, I listen and I seem to know what the message is. Other people I know listen and they hear the right message, and the press will sit there and nitpick over the words and say, well, technically what he said is X. Well, that's not how people communicate. I think most of us understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, but it's not hyperbole, though, is it? Yeah, but hang on, it's not hyperbole when he phones in radio talk shows in New York and says, my name's John, I'm Donald Trump's PR man. It was obviously Donald Trump. It's not hyperbole, it's a lie when he says, I saw people dancing. Hang on, he said, wait a minute, he said, I saw people dancing on the rooftops in New York, celebrating the events of 9/11. You can't see Ground Zero from Trump Tower. He says, I had the biggest inauguration crowds of any US president. He didn't.
All right, first off, I'm not going to worry about how big the crowd was as far as his inauguration is concerned. But again, I'm hearing the press picking up on trifling matters when I think, again, there's a man who is dealing with much more important issues. And, you know, again, you're not getting on the guy's level. And we can, you know, listen, we can play this game all day long if you want. We've been playing it for the last year. I don't think it's accomplished anything because the press's ratings with the public opinion ratings have gone down massively. Now, his ratings aren't so great, but I think the difference is he's willing to do what he needs to do without worrying about ratings, whereas, again, the press are just not being trusted anymore. You know, when I you know, hear stories put out by the press when everybody else seems to know exactly what he's talking about, and yeah, he's not a great extemporaneous speaker. He's not grown up in the political world. But, you know, you can either play the game or you can try and report what is actually going on, you know, analyze the stories.
Khalil Jashan here.